Welcome back to Foldspace AI Studio. This episode, we're going to talk about the shift to native AI experiences in SaaS. What does it take to transform into AI native experiences? And how does agentic user experience any different than your core AI agents? So before we dive into the agent-led shift, I'm excited to have with me today the Chief Product and Technology Officer at Vidmob, Joe Galarneau. His team currently undertakes a massive transformation, moving their platform from one that shows data to the users to actually one that proves value to them. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mickey. Good to see you.
So to kick things off for our listeners that might not know the space, can you tell us about what is Vidmob and what exactly is creative data?
Yeah, so Vidmob works with some of the world's largest brands and agencies to help use AI to make their advertising more effective. And the way we do this is we analyze all their digital advertising through the lens of machine learning. We understand what components are in the advertising regarding people and colors and placement and speech and music. And then we correlate that with the performance attributes of that advertising. So for instance, if someone clicks on an ad, if they view a video all the way through, if there's a sale that consummates by virtue of that ad, and then we use machine learning models to correlate the attributes with these performance outcomes to help recommend to our customers what they should do more of, how they should change their existing ads, and what they should stop. So it's we work with some of the world's largest brands around this, and the company's been around for 11 years now. It's based in New York City.
Awesome, that's amazing. So let's talk about the motivation. What was the moment you realized that showing more data or redesigning the screens wasn't going to move the needle anymore?
Yeah, so the problem we're chasing, being data-driven, already disadvantages a traditional SaaS application. So as we've gone down the road of taking these advertising assets and doing more and more analysis against them, that generated more data, it generated more visualizations, it generated more potential signals for our customers. And so the traditional trajectory would be just, let's add more screens, let's add more reports, let's add more complexity. Now, this may serve the expert user well because they know exactly how to use that data to do actions off platform, but that's not who a bulk of our users are. And so we found as we went down the road of actually, we thought having an application that was more valuable, and in fact, it wasn't more valuable because it was more opaque, it was more obfuscated. It was something where people couldn't harvest the value out of that. And really, you have to look at value through the lens of what the customer is doing. At some point, if you're a SaaS app, you have something you present to a user. It could be an insight, a prescription, a piece of data, and then they're doing something with it later on down the line that creates value. And your goal is to say, how can I decrease that air gap between what I'm showing them and that value that's actually consummated wherever it ends up being? And I think in our world, we actually saw that gap getting wider and wider as we threw more data at them. So it really demanded us thinking about the problem differently.
Yeah, that was my experience as well in SaaS B2B platforms. You end up adding more capabilities because customers ask for more powerful features, more advanced features. Sales are asking for more advanced features as well to beat the competition. But then at some point, the distance between user intent and outcomes is just growing and becoming impossible. I think it's at some point, the features outpace your UI, the menus and capabilities, and then you end up sacrificing the ease of use. So you've kicked off a program, we call it the shift from general description to user-centric prescription. What were the goals behind that shift?
Yeah, we actually launched a program a few months ago we called Humanize. And actually is born of the basic concept of that. As you evolve a SaaS application, you tend to gravitate unconsciously towards building for wizards. Again, the people who have PhDs in your application, the folks who are super experts in your data, and that's great. You really want those people, in your camp to help inform your product delivery. But if you're optimizing for those people, you're optimizing for the wrong use cases. You really want to optimize for humans. People who can walk up to your application and with a small amount of education and training be minimally productive. And so we felt Humanize was the way to do just that to our application, to make it for the humans while we still offer paths in and satisfaction of user goals for the wizards. We really want to really solve for that case. So we started looking through our user base. We started doing ethnographic research on how customers used our data to do their jobs, and then started thinking through for every piece of data that we presented, what's the ultimate resting point for that data in terms of value. And I think we can and we have been gradually reforming our user experience to conform to that. But it's a huge, huge project to do that for existing SaaS apps. So that's where we thought going down the agentic route would be a faster way to get to that goal line.
Yeah, I think there's the classical path here as well, where you have the early adopters. They are tech savvy, they love the platform, they adopt every new feature. And there's an early majority that they just want to get the job done and can't really handle all the new features. They just simply don't have the bandwidth to invest the cognitive effort required to learn a new platform. So I love the term humanize and the goal of changing the way people interact with the SaaS platform, which is really exciting. I also love the phrase you used that you want to become the McKinsey of creative intelligence. What does that actually mean in practice, and how do you turn that into real product behavior? If you can give us like a couple of examples.
Yeah, well, that also drove, our consideration of how to solve the problem I just mentioned. So if Vidmob is a marketing technology platform that's in the creative data and creative intelligence space, our R&D efforts around solving that problem are where our investments need to be. And what we want to avoid doing is, frankly, solving the same problem that thousands of other companies outside our industry have already solved. So we're not going to build new front-end frameworks. We're not going to, build custom databases. We're not going to do all those things. Why should I do that? That's not what I can do best. I need to concentrate my investments on the things that only we can do well and are dedicated to the problems we're trying to solve. And so I think, the idea of McKinsey of creative intelligence would be, if we are in this emerging sector where, if you think about the bigger global advertising space of $1 trillion is spent every year on advertising in all formats, not just digital advertising, which is about 600 something million dollars, but linear digital and out of home and so forth and so on. How can we use our data to inform better investment decisions there? Of that $1 trillion, about $140 billion is spent in actually creating the advertising. So our goal is to say, we can use data to not only inform better effective use of that $140 billion, but the overall spend that creative is making happen, then I think that's a huge, huge thing. And so, frankly, anything that is not dedicated towards that goal, frankly, is superfluous. It's something that I want to find a way of finding a better solution that's cheaper, faster, better, and I want to concentrate my efforts around solving that problem.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like, the data and the insights around the data is kind of the key. And as a category leader, you want to be the best at this as opposed to dealing with other fronts. I think that there's a lot of like priorities when it's come to chief product and technology officers. You have to deal with, number one, your core business. Have you been the best at your core features and capabilities? Number two, that probably like the backend analysis and stuff like that. And then there's the user experience. Let's zoom out and talk about like the broader SaaS. There's I think there's a UX crisis that we are all dealing with, and to accelerate transition from kind of UI to AI. I call it like kind of the UX crisis in SaaS, and we've seen all these like tools come around. It's like vibe coding, prompting, and you get some to value very, very quickly. And there's a well-known kind of paradox in product design. The more powerful the product becomes, then the harder it becomes to use. Why do you think that is happening across the industry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, SaaS is not a monolithic category. You have lots of different subcategories in terms of how people use the applications. I think in the space that I've spent a lot of time in, which is ad tech and martech, there's actually a kind of subterranean problem that also is in play that actually affects the issue you just mentioned, and that's around the issue of managed services. And so typically what happens is an application will become more powerful. You're trying to solve a problem, and you use humans. You as the software company use humans to bridge the gap between user experience and user goals. And that becomes more expensive and less feasible over time as you scale, as your problems become more sophisticated, as the volume of data going through your platform becomes a bigger deal. So I think the AI revolution isn't just an evolution of user experience. It's also a really viable and cost-effective way of flipping the script regarding using managed services. And listen, I mean, most people in SaaS want to get out of the managed services addiction. But oftentimes you have to make significant technology investments. You have to solve it with the right technology. And some applications is easier than others. For very sophisticated applications, that's a very hard road to take. And so I see AI as a way of actually solving not just two problems. One, the problem you just mentioned, the specification of an application getting bigger and AI is helping there, but also, frankly, to kind of help relieve some of the human costs of doing that. So that way, the humans that we have doing managed services, aren't going to go away. They can be redeployed back to our idea of McKinsey of creative data. If managed service is about using an application on behalf of a user, if you're doing professional services or consultation, you want to be able to do things that are basically amplifying the value of the application. What are things that you're using the application to get deeper and bigger insights, to transform workflows and find greater value and that sort of thing. We want our humans to do those sorts of things, not just push an interface up the hill. So I think AI is probably the first credible technology that I've seen in a while that can let us do that.
Love it. What a perfect analogy, pushing the interface up the hill. In SaaS, we end up deploying a lot of resources to handle the usability gap. I remember in Gainsight, we called it the customer success of the gap. Instead of dealing with strategic implementation, they handhold clients through every step of the journey. And I believe this is inherently because the density of features that you have to have in B2B SaaS, right, in B2B platforms, especially for enterprises. These businesses by design need the operational features, they need the workflows, they need all these security features. And you end up using your best talent, like the strategic customer success, to be the first line of defense, the first line of support, or just to do the work on behalf of the client. So inherently, your client is not even adopting the platform, and therefore the potential churn is very high. And I think with agentic UI, with agentic product experiences, we can deploy these resources to monitor and train the agent and that will handle the work in tandem with the client, and also allows them to scale and address the more strategic relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, the other problem you have with that evolution of complexity is that, naturally, as your company understands the problem better, you build a more sophisticated solution. Your customers come along that journey with you. They build skills and workflows that support your new UX. And ideally, what you want to be able to do is, once you understand the problem fully, is reconceptualize all that into a simpler experience. However, you are a bit captive to your customers, because now, you have to not just say, I'm going to go change screen number 3 and give you a blue button. I'm going to totally blow up how you think about this problem. Now, that may be the right way of doing it in terms of user experience and software design, but the change management agenda around that is huge. And so oftentimes there's the inertia around the thing you've built that is just really hard to escape from. And we all know software companies have gone through major redesigns, and that never ends well. I mean, it may ultimately be the right thing to do, but it's always painful. It's always more expensive than you envisioned it to be. It's always very disruptive, and it's an opportunity for a competitor to come in from left field who doesn't have that residual baggage of a bad experience and come and reconceptualize the problem. So to me, again, AI is a way of end running that problem, because you can still fix your user interface and your experience, but you're able to create a new channel, a new modality for users to interact with the data.
Totally. In B2B, there's definitely more than one persona that the platforms needs to serve. There's usually that as part of being a business, there's like analysis, practitioner, decision maker. There's so many different personas that actually even log into the platform, and they just deal with different aspects. There's the admin that control the access control and elements like that. There's like the practitioner that writes the campaign. That might be like a performance marketing that wants to look at the results. So you need to cater to all these personas. How many personas do you have in Vidmob that the platform has to serve?
We've actually, that's an interesting problem we had, because when we started looking at this, we basically had the classical Henry Ford problem. You can have a Model T in any color as long as it's black. And so as you came into the platform, you basically got the same experience no matter what your goals were, no matter what you sat in your organization. So one of the first things we did early on, which may sound like a very basic thing, is we just want to understand, well, what's your job function? What are you doing? What are your goals? And we surveyed all our users, and come to find out we had 15 different categories of job functions coming in. Now, obviously, if you think about persona, you don't need to be that fine-grained regarding persona. You think about jobs to be done, you think about goals, you think about pain points, you think about workflows, and you start consolidating things up. So we ended up coming up with about 5 or 6 persona, which are probably still too many. We're still rationalizing those. But what are the kind of the main flows that happen where people are getting certain value out of it? What are they trying to do with it? What are the exception flows? What are the pain points? And then that's what we're trying to optimize against. And we have in our user experience are starting to customize and tailor things there. But one thing that's very interesting about the AI workflow is that we can then pipe that personalized data into an agent and say, hey, Mickey is a media strategist who works at a mid-sized brand. Let's go ahead and tailor how we tell him information versus how we would talk about a creative effectiveness person at a global agency. And we don't have to build new experiences to do that. The AI can do that dynamically. And that's a huge unlock. We still would like to do that in our conventional UX, but the road to doing that is much, much steeper.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely 15 to 5 key personas is a great move. Adding the fact that each comes with different objectives and value path that you need to cater to. So, which created a lot of pressure on roadmap, on UX, and the classic solutions that we're seeing in many times is let's revamp the UI, which is kind of ignoring the fact that the issue is actually the WIMP interface, right? The window icon interface that is not adaptive to the user and to the user journey, the user goals, and different persona. It's just different technology. It's very static. And in the past, and still, frankly today, we still see the tools that being used, like in-app tooltips that are kind of trying to jump in and point the user to notice elements and guides that yet again are asking the user to educate themselves in every way possible while they're trying to just do their job. But in the AI first era, the agent acts as the driver, right? That they know the path, and the users are the passengers that can focus on where they want to go without being asked to memorize the map. And I think that's a reality we need to internalize. Which leads me to the next questions. What signals in your mind the CPO or CTO should pay attention to from your perspective that indicates that they've hit the limit of the traditional UX?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's one of those things like it when you see it. I can't say as if I have a well-defined heuristic. I would say, like, as someone who's been around the block a few times, if I walk up to an application and the level of opacity just has me scratching my head regarding how do I accomplish certain user goals, I just have a limited patience for that sort of thing. So I oftentimes am a bad customer for other SaaS apps because I get into them and, like, if I can't start intuiting what's happening, I have enough tool tips and I have enough contextualization of pages. To me, like that's a bad experience. So I wish I had a metric, and I'm sure there is something somewhere that someone smarter than I has developed that can do that. I think what we see is typically we look at customer signals. We talk to customers when we show customers the first time a demo, and they say, okay, how do I use this to do my job? Like, that's a clear signal. Like, if the application does not speak to you, to me, an application has to have a very clear value narrative, meaning it has to be able to show you a piece of data. It has to be able to point to what to do with that data, how it connects with your user goals and your job. And so if all those clues are not, like, in the experience, then you failed in some sort of way. So I wish, again, I knew how to objectively score that. But I think we're in a situation where we're not satisfying our customer needs as well as we should. The lucky thing is that a lot of SaaS apps that have gone down this road, you have all the pieces and parts are just not organized in the right way. So we have the data, we have the insights, we have the things we think are valuable and indeed are valuable. We're just not connecting that value with the customer journey as closely as we should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think probably one of the signals would be like the use cases. Like if your tool is supposed to kind of achieve more and more use cases, it's a first signal. Things I saw is like how many people can demo the product, and then if the question in the company is like only 2 or 3, or you have to call someone professional, that's also a signal that is probably became like too powerful and feature dense that you need to kind of really have someone go in, which is again classic stage in a life cycle for a company. As they grow, they get established, and then suddenly there's there's too many use cases as well. But it's interesting, like you guys are collecting the user feedback, the signals, and seeing like, oh, we're seeing, a lot of signals that says like they're trying to achieve stuff and they get stuck, or they kind of have that input is really good way to estimate.
Well, you also, I mean, you also look right now, I mean, obviously you're in the AI space and you have a lot of pure companies that are going this, hyper growth. And so why is hyper growth happening? I mean, hyper growth is happening because you onboarded a user, they see extraordinarily clear connection to value. The friction to being productive is like almost near zero, and they just go off to the races. And so they get, if you think about, if you're a product person, the promise of a product, like I think AI is probably the closest place that you have like frictionless planes and massless pulleys where you can actually achieve that sort of realization very much out of the gate. And so in the rest of the world, we have to build a lot of things to get even close to that world. In AI, you get close to that world pretty darn quickly. And that's why I think pure play AI first companies are achieving this sort of growth, and existing SaaS companies are struggling because we're always thrashing on trying to get to this ideal platonic world, and we're just never going to get there through conventional means.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think that as someone that was advocating for PLG, as you know me, I was one of the co-authors of Mastering Product-Led Growth and Building a Growth Platform. One of the biggest challenges in B2B was the onboarding, the setup that is required in order for the users to experience value, which made PLG motion not really practical to most of the platforms unless the user is the buyer and they know what to expect, like project management. Many other platforms don't have that luxury. They have to go through that complex setup. And then they start using a storm of in-app and emails and chat to try to educate the user and trying to make the product any easier. And that was not really working. So now I see the shift to agent-led, since AI is pretty much rewriting the rules of how users consume SaaS. And I do believe that agent-led has a twist on the tactics used to accelerate users to value. So in my view, the PLG strategy of reducing friction or driving adoption is still very much true. The tactics, though, are going to be very different, in my opinion. It's not going to be about educating the user or on your features, menus, best practices, you name it. It's going to be more of educating the agent on how to drive your product and how to identify the user intent to the relevant outcomes and choose the best path for the user. So in other words, applying ALG strategy makes PLG for B2B truly possible, and potentially even unlocking a consumption-based pricing model for them. So kind of switching gears, I would love to hear your take on what makes AI or agent-led experience uniquely suited to solve complexity that UI changes alone could not fix at Vidmob, for example.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, a user enters a SaaS experience and their goal is to do a certain thing, and all the things we throw in the way of doing that thing are just necessary, investments of time. We have to learn, I have to learn navigational structure. I have to learn how to use reports. I have to learn how to navigate filters and exports and. But at the end of the day, all we really care about is that last step of like, okay, here's the report, the value, the button I press to make something happen. And I think agents are just much better than humans at learning, all the things that need to be happening. And obviously, they don't necessarily need to navigate the same path that a user does. They may have to navigate an API or an MCP service or something else to do that. But what they are good about is agents are about goals and users are about goals. And so basically, they're still ending in the same place. It's just the path for each of us is different. So frankly, if users don't care about, they don't love experiencing your application, they just want to get the payout at the end, then if they can communicate those goals to an agent is much more able to achieve those goals than a human is. So I think, no one is like, losing any sleep, like, oh, I wish I could spend 20 more minutes in this application navigating through the 4 sub menus and hitting the filters and pressing the export button. They just want to get the thing at the end and be able to go on with their lives and do something else. So agents are a great thing. I think both you and I'm guessing, and even our personal lives with as product people and as startup guys, like we are using AI all the time in all sorts of ways to be more productive. So I think, agents are a way in the context of a given application for us to do that and for those agents to get smart about our applications and help our users to be more effective.
Absolutely. I agree. AI unlocks productivity. In fact, it's like leapfrogging us, to, so to speak, into a new era, and completely resets our expectations, right? Like we see a near-term future where full self-driving is a thing. Autonomous technologies are going to do all the things that humans prefer not to focus on necessarily. And back to the context of SaaS, I feel the bar is moving faster than ever before. Which create even opportunity and risk to some of the players that if they don't really provide much better product tools and with usability and productivity, they risk literally the business from being able to grow or sustain customers. So, and the other part about expectation is that actually we saw that users, when engaging with chat interfaces now, they do expect the agent to act, not just to answer questions. So it's exciting time to see that.
I my prior job, we were building some generative applications just prior to the launch of ChatGPT, which is like mid to 2022, and the first ones we launched, which were as a kind of an analytics chatbot in parallel to a traditional SaaS environment, our users were just like very buoyant about, oh, well, this is really cool. I get to insights a lot quicker, and then ChatGPT comes out and people start using it and their expectations start changing. The idea that what's the magical thing that AI can do once you've experienced, now that bar gets raised up. So a year later, even though our application continued to evolve, our user expectations were far, far higher than they were it's kind of called pre-ChatGPT. And so now, all of our users have really, really high expectations on what technology can do. And obviously, traditional SaaS experiences are just lagging far behind that. But even AI experiences, the ones that were built 12, 18 months ago are still like dinosaurs. They're still ancient in terms of using older ways of thinking about stuff. So even in this new world, things are just moving at such light speed that if you were going to spend time and money keeping up with it, it's just impossible. Which actually, in our world, as I mentioned earlier, I want to invest my resources on thinking through how do I use creative data to help my customers make more money with their advertising. What I don't want to do is have to build things that are commodity technologies that everyone else in the planet also needs to be able to use. So I think that was a huge consideration for us regarding partnering with Foldspace, was that we are never going to be world class regarding understanding the application of agentic and AI technologies to a general SaaS application. We're just not. We are world's experts on creative data, and so the idea from a CPTO perspective of build versus buy is I want to buy for competitive parity, and I want to build for differentiation. And to me, parity is very much like we all have to have these experiences. There's no way around that. But I also don't want to stand up, most of my engineering team to build this thing that is basically agnostic to my industry. I want to have my team focus on the things that are not agnostic. So that's where I think separating out our efforts and going with a third party that was, really world class in this respect was a big decision for us.
Awesome. Yeah, we definitely see that every day. Like at Foldspace, we see like, the new model comes out. Is it actually better or worse? How does it deal with user experience? It's definitely like a very fast moving industry, and there's a lot to keep up for sure. Let's talk about like the changes from like strategy, like you came to Vidmob and obviously like build a new product strategy and things like that. But now in this new era of agentic or agent-led, what changed in the product and engineering teams with the way they design features? How do they think about kind of like right now the shift towards intent versus like workflow and navigation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, both you and I have a few years on you, but we probably also went through the cloud era where, I remember having, teams of people who would go into colos or data centers and be racking and cabling servers. And then the cloud comes along and now, infrastructure becomes like, an abstract fabric. You just, you organize like software. And so now I think AI is doing the same thing for traditional software. We're actually viewing our trajectory as AI enablement is doing something else for us. So, for instance, right now we view our main vector of value of being the SaaS application, and people interact with this to get value and do things. And so we certainly are using agentic and AI technologies to make that easier. But we also view the ultimate maturity curve of how we work to kind of be four stages. Is one, right now we're in kind of called the stage of just description. We describe a problem for a user, and then they take that information, they do something with it offline. Ultimately, we think the next layer, which we're also doing, is around prediction. We tell you what will happen if you make certain changes. It helps you make better changes. We then want to get into prescription, which is what we're starting to do now with some of the AI technologies. But the ultimate goal for us, frankly, is around optimization. We want to be able to tie our data to actually automatic actions that make things better immediately. And so if you think about our world, about creative data, there's two paths that can take. One path would be, and as we all have been seeing with Nano, Banana, and Stable Diffusion and whatnot, the creation of advertising using AI. Now that's something that's going to be in 2026 a huge disruptive influence. And we see that our data can be an essential element in that process. And so we view AI as a way of saying, how can we expose our data and recast and reform it using AI to be able to be an ingredient in someone else's cake? So that way, when some other platform is creating this AI-generated advertising, it's done by being informed by Vidmob data. And so AI is a way of making that product better, but it's not a UI, it's not a SaaS app. It's basically a way of kind of interacting with another AI system and talking to it and having feedback loops back and forth via MCP and agentic technologies. The other thing we're doing around optimization is that in advertising, you have the creative, the thing you run, and you have the campaign, meaning where do I run it? How much money do I spend against? Which audiences I'm playing against? Which geographies I'm doing? What my campaign objective is? Well, all those things are dimensions of choice. And so we can say, there's another AI standard that's coming around in the advertising world around using agents to do that. So how can we build agents in our world to talk to those decisioning agents and make those guys smarter based on our data? So ultimately, I'd see a few years down the line, a SaaS app will be a component of our value delivery. It will not be the main component. We will have other agentic vectors in decisioning and generative AI creative that will help our customers get automatic value out of our data enabled by agentic technology and their side and our side. So I think it's a very AI has just totally blown apart, how we regard, what our company strategy is and where we're going.
That's super interesting. I think it's a very valuable lesson as well. I think that many chief product officers, they go and they get excited about AI, and there's definitely like things to learn. I think what you're saying is like strategically, data, first party data is really important, right? You guys are actually analyzing creative data and insights on first party data. And it sounds like what you're saying, that can be an inference data to the world's, agents, like any use case that needs those intelligent data points can be leveraged. So Nano Banana, like if it generates ads, it can actually personalize ads if it can use that inference data. So I think it's like really important that in the future, SaaS and SaaS experience is not going to be the differentiation. The differentiation is going to be the data, the value on top, the way you integrate with other agent in an agent-led world. I think inference data is a thing. I also think that to get an inference data, and we saw recently more like from NVIDIA and others, like the cost of the data and producing real data and real facts, and then leveraging inference and inference compute, that is becoming a real thing to make it very powerful, energy-wise, token-wise. So I think a strong inference data from first-party data can be really interesting because now you can drive time to value and you kind of really allow the agent to be super smart instantly.
Yeah, no, and actually, if you also focus back on our conversation today on, let's call it user experience based agents, if you are building a constellation of agents that are in your back end looking at all the business operations you're doing, all the goals, and then you have a fleet of hundreds or thousands of agents. If you have a orchestration framework that's facing the user, like Foldspace helps with, then you can start exposing that functionality in a way that goes around your UI. So as Foldspace will let you take agentic outputs, you can build customized React experiences. And so if you think about like, I want to have a very complex analysis, and the traditional path to that may have been, I have to build some backend service, I have to build an API, I have to build a React page to do something, maybe a D3 visualization. Well, in the agentic world, you can say, I have an agentic orchestration framework that's user facing. I can build an agent in the backend that does all that analysis. I can then build a very bespoke visualization, that's in my app, but maybe separate from my app, and I can get to market much more quickly in a rapid, agile fashion to start exposing that things there. So I even see even classical application development being upended by this beyond just the kind of express lane conversational UI. I mean, there's lots of ways this can enable more classical analysis, but not in the traditional kind of multi-step application development model that we're all been used to.
That's super interesting. I think conversational, you're saying, is allowing you to experiment things and ship things into the conversational interface, even with visualization. So just to see if it like drives value quickly, as opposed to waiting for a full, release cycle. Shoving it in another menu items and trying to see how it doesn't disrupt the other functionality. That's super interesting. I think conversational UI has good and bad. Like it allows you to do anything and everything, right? So it's like very quick time to value, showing those elements to the end user. And then I think it's really a new way of thinking from agility and then the flip side, I think there's a huge expectation from users that they expect the agent now to do almost anything, to know everything in your app, right? If you're, thinking about launching a conversational UI, users are not going to be just like, oh, great, it just answers questions, or it just gave me this report or insight. They kind of expect very quickly that it should be operational throughout the platform and just to drive the goals that they intend. They care about the goals, as we said before.
Yeah, I mean, in the wider search world, I think you see, there's search, but people don't search; they want to find. And so the idea is that, like, I want to get to the ultimate goal. I think in our world, I can very well see where, people, as we now implement Foldspace and people are using it to answer questions, like I mentioned, we can now connect the dots on optimization, where someone may say, show me an answer to this question. And Foldspace would go through and look at different, different data from different screens, or maybe an agent, it pings offline, it synthesizes an answer, plays it back to the user. And now, like we mentioned, like what next? What's the ultimate, goal the user is going to do? I see then we can connect that agent to another agent that's actually an action agent. It could be something in our fleet. It could be something in a third party. And so now we see the complete life cycle of the user goals being satisfied in a single experience. Whereas before, we were always going to only take them so much. We could take them just to the precipice of value, and now they had to jump somewhere else and use a different application or use something else. Well, I could see now, like, you can live in one experience and get everything you need out of that same experience once we start talking to each other that way. So, I mean, we're maybe, a couple years away from that nirvana, but I definitely see we'll get there shortly.
Another great analogy. People don't want to search. They want the answer. They don't want more features. They want outcomes, right? So to wrap things up, I want to see if you have any advice you can share with CTOs and CPOs out there that they should keep in mind as they move towards an AI first or AI native product strategy.
Yeah, I mean, um, like I mentioned, I mean, I've been building ML products for a long time, and probably, more classical AI, as we call it. I mean, I didn't start using the word AI probably until about 2 years ago. I resisted for a long time because I thought that was more of a pop culture science fiction sort of thing. But now I'm using it in regular speech. But any of that, I think, no one can afford to sit on the sidelines here. Do you want to be on the bleeding edge by doing your own work and, be on top of the latest model rev? You don't have time to do that either. So to me, it's differentiating what is core to your business, what is core to your competitive posture. That's where you invest your time, and it could be like, in our world, using AI to understand the greater details of creative assets, to be able to build models that tie that to predictive outcomes. And those are things that no one else is doing, and we can use AI ourselves and our own development labor to figure that one out. Everything else, frankly, is a commodity. So as a CTO or CPO, you want to think through where you want to place your bets, and then find great partners to help you with the other things. But what you can't do is just basically say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and, this AI thing's a bubble. It's a fad. Like, it is not, and it will roll over you, especially if you're in the SaaS world. We see currently in the wider SaaS application world, growth is plateauing. There's a lot of incumbents that are starting to succumb to new entrants, and so you cannot do nothing. I think it's a matter of what you do and what your strategy is, and it depends on what your level of investment is. But I think, if you have a good eye towards build buy, you understand how can you satisfy your existing goals with the application of new third-party tech, as well as in very surgical ways implement this tech internally. I think that's a winning strategy. And just, I mean, learn by doing, learn by building. Do not learn by analyzing and reading the blogs and positing things and listening to podcasts, no matter how smart they are. You have to be in the battle for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's the most exciting times ever, like, in my career as well. Like, we've seen so many transformations happening, the mobile, the internet, all this cloud and everything. But now the speed of change is nuts. And, so it's really interesting to see how SaaS B2B product engineering team are kind of switching gears to kind of, I call it like insane mode. It's like so many things are changing, and you have to move fast. So just like stay behind. And to your point, you have to get your hands dirty. You have to actually play with it, because the blogs are great. But, even a 3-month-old blog is already like ancient. It's history.
Oh yeah, we haven't even. I mean, we could spend many other podcasts talking about how within the software development world, how the roles of engineers, product managers, data scientists, user experience are totally changing and morphing, getting blurring. And you see rapid prototyping and vibe coding and. I mean, it's like what we're building is changing radically. How we're building is changing radically. I mean, again, very exciting, very scary, and I just don't know where it's going to end. I mean, I know it's going to be cool where we end up. I just don't know like what that path looks like. But it's good to be on the ride.
Thanks again for the conversation today. It was very inspiring hearing how you think about product strategy, how you use inference data, and how your team has embraced this new agent-led approach at such a fast pace. This was incredibly insightful, and looking forward to continuing our discussion in future episodes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for the invite, and had a lot of fun.